Well, James Boyd covers the Colts of the Athletic. He's kind enough to join us now for a couple minutes. Hey, James, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Well, let's start with this Jonathan Taylor drama, the latest chapter this week. I mean, break down for us where things currently stand and where the pushback is coming from in terms of Jim Irsay versus the GM. Where are things right now?
Things right now have been unique, and that's been a good word to describe the Colts' offseason. They came out, at least sources have reported to us, that they're allowing JT to seek a trade. At first, Jim Irsay about 3 weeks ago said, we're not going to trade him. He's with us. But now they've kind of opened that door a little bit. But in my eyes, nothing has really changed because the asking price for JT remains very high, and they're not just going to give him away. So, assuming that teams will not want to meet that trade demand or give up a first round pick, JT is still most likely to be with the Colts this season, in my opinion.
So was this I don't want to say a stunt from Jim Irsay, but if the price is the same, what is behind this change, this leaked change that they might consider a trade?
I think it's sort of the tactic that the Ravens use for Lamar Jackson will allow you to sort of see what your market is with other teams, and then when those other teams don't meet your market, you'll come back to us. So that's why I think the Colts are playing sort of a card to show JT, hey, we might not be offering you what you want, but you're not going to get what you want elsewhere either, and we still own your rights and your future.
Why do you think there is such pushback with signing him to a long-term deal that is what he wants?
I think one, it's the running back position. Obviously, they're not going to get these lucrative deals we've seen in the past. But number two, he's coming off an injury-plagued season. Career low in rushing yards, career low in touchdowns, mixed 6 games with an ankle injury that he still has not been medically cleared from. He remains on the physically unable to perform list, so that's a factor that I think a lot of people have to weigh in as far as the Colts and other teams when they consider adding him to their roster. So it would be different if JT was coming off of back-to-back All-Pro seasons, but in the NFL, it is a very much what have you done for me lately league, and lately he's been hurt.
And that narrative that you mentioned around the running back position, I feel like has been the story of the offseason, at least heading into training camp, with this position being undervalued now when guys aren't getting paid what they need to get paid. Do you think that JT needs to have a reality check or at least kind of redefine what his value is based on the injury and, like you said, the value of the position now?
I think yes and no, and I say that because if he's asking for them to reset the market or something, then obviously you can't go down that route. You cannot expect them to break the bank for you. However, I think a big point of contention is from Jim Irsay himself. He said we have not offered him an extension at all. So to be, less than 2 years removed from a first-team All-Pro season and not receive any type of offer, anything, I think that's a huge thing that factors into why both sides have not been able to come to an agreement.
Can you get a sense of how this is affecting the locker room? Other backs on the team, his friends, his teammates. What has this done to the locker room?
I think a lot of the players have been sort of touchy-feely about the subject. They've saying, hey, he's been here, he's been engaged, we know how special he is. But at the same time, a lot of it has been, let's just go forward and do what we have to do on our own because they know they can't determine what's next. They can't give JT any money. They can't force JT to play for the Colts. So they've been, supportive in a sense, but not really giving it too much attention, quite frankly.
Are the decisions around this saga coming from Ursay directly? How involved is Chris Ballard? Is it a group effort in terms of overall management with how to navigate this?
I think it's been a group effort for the most part. However, when Jim Irsay speaks, things usually change. So, he had that comment after they met on his luxury bus at training camp about a month ago at this point, where he comes off the bus, and one of the quotes that really went viral that night was, if I, Jim Irsay, die tonight, and if Jonathan Taylor is out of the league, no one's going to miss us. And I was like, that's not going to go over well, and it didn't. And so I think that comment, paired with the tweets he had initially, talking about the running back market and how, it is what it is, and then JT's agent jumping in the fray and saying, well, it's bad faith if you don't pay your, best player. it all got pretty personal after that, and I just think that since then we've seen this relationship sort of dissolve to where both sides kind of dug in their heels. Now, there was sort of like that olive branch extended by Jim Irsay by saying, hey, we want him back, and he's a great player, he's a great young man. But all of those things in mind, he did not say we're going to offer him more money, which is the whole reason we're in this mess to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of talking back and forth and then a lot of lip service that isn't going to solve any problems. And then there's the practicality of the regular season, which is basically upon us, and a rookie quarterback that might be impacted by not having, pieces in place. What sense do you get of how all of this is actually really affecting the offense?
I do think it affects the offense significantly. Anytime you are not having an all-pro caliber player at any position, but an offensive position, a skill position, it factors in. I don't think the Colts will be a better team without Jonathan Taylor in 2023. However, I do think that because of Anthony Richardson's skill set, him being a dual-threat quarterback, some of the deficiencies you might have in the run game with other quarterbacks who are less mobile might not be as big of a deal, because you can really generate a lot of rushing yards and rushing looks if you have a quarterback as dynamic as Anthony Richardson. Do I think it makes his job harder? Yes, but it's not to the extent where you're panicking, oh my gosh, what is he going to do? He's going to have to sink or swim eventually on his own, so maybe you just have to find out sooner.
Yeah, take us through a little bit more of what you've seen with that dynamic quality that Richardson has, just watching him, observing him leading into the regular season. We've seen a number of young quarterbacks emerge in this age of being able to use their legs and their feet and their athleticism in this way, but is there something specific that you've noted that he does really well that makes him special as you've seen him go in training camp?
Well, I'll give you my unserious answer first. I actually went to play basketball at the Jim Irsay YMCA down here in downtown Indianapolis, and maybe about a month ago, before he signed his rookie deal, Anthony Richardson just showed up and was playing with us. And so, first play, he's out there, they throw the ball from midcourt, he catches and reverse dunks it with ease.
Get out of here.
And so you see him and you're like, wow, that's an alien. This guy could go pro in whatever sport he wanted to do. So it was fun to see him in that type of setting and to see just how big he is compared to normal human beings. And then when you see him on the football field, you're like, okay, this guy can do stuff that you can't teach. Everything he does looks effortless. He runs easy, runs fast, big arm. He's got muscles on top of muscles. He was telling us he actually gained weight kind of on accident because he's still growing. He's like, yeah, my muscles just got bigger or something like that. And I'm like, that doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to normal human beings. So from that aspect, he is very exciting. And I do think that that's a reason why they took a gamble on him, because it is a gamble. He was not a great college player, but there is greatness in certain moments where you're like, okay, if it clicks, he's a top 5 player in the NFL. So I'm excited for his future, but there is a huge gap between who he is now and who he could be.
It seems like from the story you detail that he's a pretty affable guy. Who asked who if they wanted to play pickup? I mean, did he come into your game? Did you try to get into his game? How did this work?
No, Carolyn, so he's there. We were actually going to be on the same team because we got there around the same time. They have a list of like, okay, these guys get done playing, the next 5 are on the court. But the team that had won, and if you win, you stay on, one of their guys had to leave. So this team that had been winning all day, they already have a pretty good player. They pick up Anthony Richardson. So it was like playing against the Avengers. They got these tall guys who are, pretty good players, and they add, who would be the best player in the gym because of his size. So I went up against them, and in my mind, it was actually harder to play against him, not because of the talent gap and the athleticism. It was in just thinking, do not get close to him. Don't be the reason he sprains an ankle. Don't be the reason he gets poked in the eye, whatever. Just stay far away from him. So I'm like kind of playing defense, kind of not. But he's a very down-to-earth guy, very humble. I actually got a video of him about a week ago when he stood out there after practice and signed autographs for like 30 minutes. And the team actually had to come get him and say, hey, you got to come inside. We got to debrief. You got to go. And I believe he probably signed, if I'm not exaggerating, at least 50 autographs and took maybe about 20 selfies. And he was signing even more before they finally yanked him away. So he's a really down-to-earth guy. And I think that he handles the pressure, the spotlight, about as well as you can ask for a 21-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's just 21 and that sort of stuff, I feel like goes a long way when you are out with the fans, especially in a market like that in Indianapolis, where they're so used to having a quarterback that is easily identifiable as a fan forward sort of face or persona. Just before we move on, I'm assuming that this detailed account of your interaction at the YMCA exists on The Athletic. Is this just your personal story?
No, I have a video of it actually. Yeah, I have a video of him dunking during a different game when I wasn't on the court. I have to make sure to email it to you. But yes, it did actually happen. Not joking about it. And I do think after that came out, because it went everywhere, I'm sure the Colts probably called him and said, that's the last pickup game of your life. Or until you're out of the NFL. So I got a lot of, Twitter doctors in my mentions saying, oh, man, look at the way he landed and why is he out there, my quarterback. But it also reminds you, Carolyn, of how young he really is and maybe just how not far removed he is from being a kid. And I do think he's handled the spotlight really well again, but there is some sort of kid tendencies, not in a bad way, but just in the way that he talks. And even if he references high school, you're like, wait a second, high school wasn't that long ago for you. So no wonder you bring it up. That's what
it's such a great point that you make. There's a naivety, I think, that some of these young players have about the expectations, the exposure, the value that they have, that they know that they sort of probably have intrinsically, but just it's kind of like that welcome to the big show moment where you realize just how careful you have to be, how valued you are. I think that's really interesting. That's just kind of a fascinating side story that you detail with a lot of different tentacles to it. Mostly the fact that you probably didn't play any defense at all because you didn't want to get his face.
Not a chance. It was either, don't get close to him because you don't want him to get some freak injury, but number two, you don't want to go viral because he dunked on you or blocked your shot. So
I know.
Stay away.
I know. Yeah, don't touch him. Talk to me a little bit about the changes for the coaching staff, how everything is sort of gelling. I know there's a lot of question marks heading into the season on that front. What have you sort of been able to glean about not only the new head coach, but also coordinators, all that?
Yeah, I think Shane Steichen we'll start with him as the head coach, is very detail-oriented, not a guy who's going to say a whole lot. We joke about it on the beat like he's, the quickest transcribed because he doesn't say much. But I do think that he is very focused on making sure that the details are in place. I think that's why they were so high on getting him and why he might have opened the door for the Colts to feel more comfortable in drafting a guy like Anthony Richardson. Steichen was influential in Jalen Hurts' development. He helped, Phillip Rivers, back in the day. He also helped Justin Herbert develop. So this is a guy who's had success with a variety of quarterbacks and has given the Colts hope that he can do the same with, a guy like Anthony Richardson. And then they also hired Jim Bob Cooter as the offensive coordinator, another guy who has a quarterback background, knows what it takes to succeed in the NFL. And I think even Cam Turner, another quarterbacks coach they brought in, guy who's been around a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of people who have made jumps in the NFL, all of those brains together are helping to make sure that their most prized possession, the rookie quarterback, develops. And I think that that's a huge thing. But one underrated hire is Tony Sparano Jr., in my opinion, the offensive line coach, because the offensive line last year, Carolyn, was not good. I saw three quarterbacks, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, and Sam Ehlinger, all run for their life at some point. None of them looked good. None of them looked comfortable all season. And so they didn't make too many changes to their offensive line. They brought the same five that ended last year back this year to start. And so the biggest change has been Tony Sparano Jr. So I'm thinking to myself, this is a hell of a gamble. So you better hope he's a magician and he can fix this offensive line. And to me, you're not going to go from, giving up 60 sacks to the second most in the NFL last season. But if you could just be average, that's at least much better than what you had last year and allows you to really have a good evaluation of Anthony Richardson and what he could become. Because if he's running all the time, you have no idea how good or not good he is because you have this uneven playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, you think you have problems at the YMCA, how about his offensive line that needs to make sure he doesn't get destroyed every
Absolutely.
single day? Is that the biggest question mark in your mind in terms of personnel groupings, is whether or not this offensive line will improve?
I think that's one of them. That's a huge factor because nothing can be determined without those guys up front. I mean, we can talk about scheme, we can talk about philosophy, talk about toughness, grit, all those things. If they don't move other big people, it doesn't work. And so that's definitely a room or a group that you have to focus on. But to me, the biggest question mark is the defensive secondary and particularly cornerback, because Kenny Moore II is the only veteran cornerback they have on the team. Isaiah Rodgers Sr., who was expected to have a bigger role this year, he got dismissed and cut after violating the league's gambling policy, so he's gone. And now they have a bunch of undrafted guys in their second year, Dallas Flowers, DJ Baker, and then they have a bunch of rookies who are contending for, those outside starting spots. Kenny Moore will start in the slot, but those other two spots on the outside are up for grabs. So you have to wonder if a guy like second-round pick Julius Brents or fifth-round pick Darius Rush can step up and shoulder some of that load. And even if they do step up, I mean, if I had to bet, I think they're going to be very, very exposed and very, very tested early on because they're so young and so inexperienced.
That's interesting. I was just talking to an Eagles insider. You mentioned a couple minutes ago Shane Steichen's connection to Jalen Hurts and some of these other quarterbacks. And unprompted, he identified the Colts as one of these teams that he thinks could potentially surprise some people in terms of who they have and what they might be able to do. You mentioned some glaring weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball, such a promising rookie at quarterback. I mean, in its totality from the macro view, what should we expect from Indianapolis in the regular season?
I have them going 5-12, and I'm sure if the Colts locker room hold that, they want to beat me up for it. But I just think that if you play Anthony Richardson early on, which they plan to do, he's QB1, there's going to be some ups and downs, and a lot of downs just because of his inexperience and the rawness of who he is as a player. I'm not saying he can't get better, but I think at least the fans here in Indianapolis are sort of underestimating how big the gap is. And again, as a reminder, yes, Anthony Richardson has drawn comparisons to Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson. Both of those guys were Heisman winners. Both of those guys went on to win league MVPs. Anthony Richardson was not a Heisman candidate last year. He was not all SEC. He was not an All-American. So I think that there is a lot of growing pains he'll have to go through. But to me, the Colts really don't care, at least from a macro perspective, if they win a ton of games. It's, can we get to the end of the year and say our rookie quarterback showed progress? And if we end up with another top 10, top 5 pick, they're not going to be too upset about that. And the fans here are hoping that it's like top 3 so they can get Marvin Harrison Jr. and sort of run it back with the family aspect.
So they don't feel as much pressure to win necessarily as much as to put themselves on a path to success. I mean, you obviously wouldn't say blanket statement, oh, the Colts don't care if they win or lose, because that's obviously not the case. But I mean, you would guess maybe from the GM's perspective or, the front office perspective that having a season where Anthony Richardson continues to develop and they can put themselves in position to draft well might be enough of a version of success for this season.
Absolutely. I think success is all hindered on his performance, his progress, his development, because for so long they built this team as if they were a quarterback away. They thought they were a quarterback away last year with Matt Ryan, and then it all fell apart. So I think that sort of humbled this front office and this team to realize we're not as close as we think, so let's strip it. Let's, go back to the drawing board, get a young quarterback finally after Andrew Luck retired 4 years ago, and they kept getting these one-year rentals. They have a new franchise quarterback. Let's see what he has and then go from there. Now, they still haven't fully committed to a rebuild, but I do think it's probably going to come at some point because I just don't think this team is going to go out there and win, 9 or 10 games and make the playoffs and have a chance to, be in a wild card position and win a game. I don't see that happening. I do think that, again, it all comes down to Anthony Richardson staying healthy, going through the growing pains, and maybe towards, week 10, week 11, showing signs that he's getting acclimated to the NFL.
Does the schedule favor him in any way in terms of easing into the regular season and giving him a chance to get his legs underneath him, or is it pretty front-loaded?
It's not too front-loaded. They have, a division, rival, coming in right away in Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been picked by many to win the AFC South. So I expect them to have a tough go that first game. And the Colts have they've not won a season opener since 2013, I believe. And I was a junior in high school back then, so that tells you how long it's been. So that's 10 years ago. I mean, they tied last year with Houston, which is not a loss, I guess, but it's been very weird for them in season openers. And then I believe they go to Houston, I believe right after that. That should be a game that they could possibly win because Houston's not too good this year. But then they also have the LA Rams and they have the Ravens. So their schedule isn't that hard overall, but I'm just factoring in a rookie quarterback, hasn't played a lot of football, hasn't seen a lot of football, a lot of defensive schemes. I think there's going to be some times where he might be in over his head a little bit, and we're going to see some errant throws or turnover here or there that surprises you. But on the flip side with AR, he plays a full game, he's always going to do something to wow you or to snap you back to what he could be. So his highlight reel is going to be incredible, but I also think like the low light reel might be, just as crazy, too.
As it goes for a rookie in the NFL. But if he shows some promise, I think Colts fans will take it. James Boyd from The Athletic, really entertaining conversation and great insight. Thank you so much for taking a couple minutes.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to watching AR on the field rather than the hardwood this fall.
I was going to say, I'm glad he's healthy, man, for your sake. Get us those clips. Get us the backstory. We want to know more about the YMCA interaction. That sounds like so much fun. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.